Good morning and welcome to the show. Today I'd like to make an announcement. There's going to be some changes with the podcast starting immediately, effective immediately. In the past, this podcast used to be known as Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry, and that was because my primary constituents uh, were folks in the wedding industry. Because this whole podcast started out of me being on photography groups, wedding photography groups and forums, and trying to answer people's questions and to lend a business perspective to that. And then, along with encouragement from other wedding planners that I do business with, especially Laura Michael Phillips of Posh and Pristine Wedding Planning, she just said, "Look, you're pretty good at these sorts of things. Why don't you come and teach my students?" Because she used to run a wedding Nigerian wedding planning academy or something like that. And so that's why I got my start pre-pandemic in the sales consulting business. So it was from the activities that I started with in the Nigerian wedding industry, particularly people in the Abuja space, because I used to be based in Lagos, but I've been in Abuja for the last 10 years or so. So it's from all these activities, all the encouragement and all these proddings that the podcast was born. And so the name of the podcast for the last 3 years has been faithfully so Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry, because those were the people I was primarily talking to. However, in the last 3 years, it's become painfully obvious that even though I started off this podcast wanting to talk to my primary constituents, that's people in the wedding and the event space, the chief beneficiaries of the podcast seem to be people from all kinds of spaces. Let's look at it this way. Currently, I'm doing some sales advisory work for a real estate company that is trying to put up an app, well, a website anyway, that is supposed to revolutionize how people find properties, finance their rent, and things of that nature. I'm also going to be speaking with Avon Business Hub soon, if we're able to tidy that up, on um, things that people in the agricultural value chain can use to improve their business and improve their financing. That's a project that is supposed to be hitting off in Makudi in Benue State in a couple of weeks. We're still currently in talks about that. I also did some work with Avon Business Hub, talking to their people in their cohort. I can't remember what it was called anyway, but we're talking about sales, stakeholder management, and things of that nature. And you'll find that a lot of the activity that I've been doing since I started this podcast has not been limited to the wedding space. And you'll find that even though this podcast was called Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry, because of the speaking, the teaching, and the consulting that I've been doing, you'll find that a lot of the examples that I have been giving usually start off from another sector, and then I now have to work my way back and try and tie that into the wedding industry. So, since a lot of the people, oh, and then also another thing, whenever people shout out the podcast, I notice that that's something that seems to happen across the board. Whether people shout me out on um, Instagram, okay, I've received most of the shout outs on Instagram. I've spoken to a few people in person and not too many on Twitter, but it's something that I noticed that, people shout out the podcast, it's this, is this, it's amazing, blah, 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 business wisdom, all of that. And then they always throw in a caveat that it's a podcast that everyone else can benefit from. You don't have to be in the wedding space. So, since I've been doing a lot of activities beyond the wedding industry, and it looks like the chief beneficiaries of the podcast are people who are not in the wedding industry, because people who shout out the podcast, always go out of their way to point out that this is something that is for everyone. I'm making changes to the focus of the podcast and what the podcast is going to be called. So rather than it being called Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry, it's going to be called Sales for the Nigerian Business Person, because I'm still trying to talk primarily to Nigerian people about how all these sales principles that we hear about, either from business schools or over the internet or whatever, how they translate to the Nigerian experience, and how these things are universal and can help us as well, even if the theory, the principles, the ideas seem to come from Western shores or come from outside outside our own borders, outside our own boundaries. So I'm still trying to translate this to the Nigerian experience and to show that there are ways that we can go about building our business by using these timeless and universal principles. So, my conversation for now, anyway, well, let's see how things will change in the future. Who knows what the next 3 years is going to bring? So, my focus is still primarily talking to Nigerians. So, it's going to be sales for the Nigerian business person. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it's not just for folks in the wedding industry and the event space anymore, because lots of people gain benefit from it and who are not native to this space. So that is the only change that is going to happen. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you will notice that the rest of the show still sounds the same. No intro, no outro, no editing, no sponsors, no advertising. But the case studies, I guess I'm now going to relax and use whatever case study that I happen to that happens to be most handy to the subject. I'm not always going to tie it back to the wedding and the event space anymore. You still might find that a lot of the examples that I use from time to time might still be of a wedding photography nature or a wedding planning nature, and that is just going to be um, it's to be expected because that's basically where I started cutting my teeth in when it comes to being self-employed or trying to float a business. And then, of course, being that I'm still here in Abuja and I started off in that space, lots of my people, of course, my video guy, Shegun, who else, photographers that I work with from time to time, I still roll with those folks on a day to day, and I still chat with those people on a day to day. So, of course, we're still going to have case studies and examples that will come from there. But for now, I'm just going to feel free to shoot and let it fly, regardless of whatever the case study is. So, if I'm working with someone in the poultry space, for instance, and we've been able to apply sales principles effectively to growing that business, then by all means, I'm going to use that as an example over here, the poultry business. So expect things to change. Expect to hear examples from real estate today, wedding photography tomorrow, poultry next tomorrow. What else? Tech space next week. So expect things to change. But beyond that, the podcast is still going to remain the same. And also, I'd like to say thank you very much to those of you who've been listening since day one, and those of you who've been following. I really appreciate the time and attention. I know I say that a lot, but I don't take you guys for granted because you guys are the reason why I'm still doing this. The love and encouragement. So thank you very much for that. Especially for those of you who make our time to hit me up. I can't remember the name of this lady that I was chatting with, who actually Googled because of I've stopped giving out my contact details over on the podcast, but she Googled, she was able to find me, and we exchanged a couple of messages on Instagram. So for those of you who actually seek me out to give the feedback. I really appreciate what it is you do. Even if you're that person, I also can't remember the name of this lady who also sought me out. Well, that's because she saw the videos that I've been putting out on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And yeah, she gave her feedback. She thought it was wonderful. She loved the examples that I gave. And then her own bit of, what will I say, advice was that I should shave because I'm looking rather bushy in the videos. And I had a good laugh over that. Showed my wife. Of course, my mom thought that was spot on because my mom has been complaining for a while about my appearances that I'm rather unkempt and I shouldn't be that way. So anyway, for those of you who reach out to say this is the good that you're getting out of it, and for those of you who think I can do one or two things to improve, even if it's something superficial like trimming my beard and the mustache, well, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate that you guys have been following, you guys are getting value, and that you are willing to support and give suggestions about how the show can be better. So that's the announcement for today. At the next recording, we'll dive straight into business and yeah, so now that's out of the way. So it's no longer sales for the Nigerian wedding industry, it is sales for the Nigerian business person. And yeah, so that's it. That's a major change for today. And for those of you who want to reach out in the future because you want to, you have questions that need to be addressed, you want clarifications on something, you have questions, comments, or inquiries to make, feel free to hit me up reach out to me on WhatsApp. I don't respond immediately, but I definitely will respond in less than 24 hours. And the number is 08064662140. Again, that is 08064662140. The country code for Nigeria is plus 234. So hit me up on WhatsApp and let's get the conversation going and let's see what it is that you need to be addressed. So thank you very much, you guys, for listening. It's been a wonderful 3 years so far. Let's look towards what the next 3 years can bring. So thanks for the time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.